Ages and 5, and today I would like to introduce you to ways in which we can develop LGBTQIA plus inclusion within our early years settings in accordance with the Scottish Government's 2021 policy for LGBTQIA plus topics and experiences to be embedded across all areas of the curriculum for excellence at all levels. And this is, of course, a huge topic, and there would be no way to cover everything all at once, but I hope that today we'll be able to cover some of the ideas around how we can develop inclusion into the early years, and we'll bring some definitions of terms that I'll be using to ensure we all have that baseline understanding before having a look at the inclusive curriculum and how this can help to support LGBTQIA plus children and their families. Part of this is around deconstructing the language, reflecting on our current practices, and I'll also share some resources that are available before hopefully summing all this up within the documentation that supports all that we discuss. And then we'll have some time for any reflections or questions you might wish to share at the end of the presentation. So throughout, I will be using the acronym LGBTQIA+, and you may have seen different variations of this in media or policy. There's no one term that everyone uses consistently, so it's best not to get bogged down with, I have to remember all letters, what order. It's more impactful around using this plus, as that then encompasses any and all other sexual and gender identities. And we may not necessarily use these terms within the earlier setting, but this will hopefully give you some understanding when you do come into contact with these diverse identities. So first of all, we have L for lesbian, and this refers to one who identifies as a woman who's emotionally and or physically attracted to other women. So in early years, we would maybe say, this is someone that two women can fall in love. Then we have G for gay. This refers to someone who is emotionally and or physically attracted to people of the same gender. Some who identify as women prefer to refer to themselves as gay women rather than as lesbian, but it is most commonly used to reference those who identify as men. And again, we would say in the early years, we might say two men when they fall in love. And then we have bisexual, so this is a person who is emotionally and or physically attracted to people of more than one gender or regardless of gender. Historically, definitions of bisexual used to refer to an attraction towards men and women. However, many bisexual men and women and mainly bisexual people, recognise there are more than those two genders. So a nicer way to say this in the early years context might be, they fall in love with the person rather than their gender. Then we have T for trans or transgender, and this is an umbrella term for those whose gender identity or expression differs in some way from the gender that was assigned to them at birth, and this conflicts with the norms expected by the society they live in. So you may have heard non-binary, gender diverse, gender fluid. All of these would come under that umbrella. Then we have Q for queer, and again another umbrella term which is used for diverse sexual orientations or gender identities that are not heterosexual and do not fit within a gender binary, and it's used to challenge the idea of labels and categories such as lesbian, gay, bisexual and so on. It's important to note that this is with a term used within the community, but some people do associate it with more negative connotations, so it's important to check in that everyone is comfortable with this term being used within the context. Then we have I for intersex, and this is a person whose chromosomes or reproductive organs or genitalia vary in some way from those which are traditionally considered male or female in terms of biological sex, and this may be apparent at birth, or it can become apparent later in life as they go through puberty or when trying to conceive. We recognise this definition as a medical term, but some people do strongly identify with their intersex identity. And then finally we have A for asexual, and this is a person who does not experience or experiences little sexual attraction, and asexual people can experience platonic attraction but may have little or no sexual desire or need within those relationships. So that is our acronym and our definitions. It's important to note that everyone experiences their identity differently, and so these definitions may fit for some, but not for all. There's also a whole host of other identities that people would refer to themselves as. So if in doubt, it's always best to ask, how do you experience your identity? Then we have heteronormativity, and this is the assumption that everyone is straight, and this is often supported by stereotypes. So there we can see we've got the pink for girls, blue for boys, and all that kind of idea of femininity and masculinity and what is expected as a result of your gender. Then we have rainbow families, and this is a family with members who are a part of the LGBTQIA+ community. It's important to remember that rainbow families are not always two gay men or two lesbian women, and we should strive not to fall into these stereotypical tropes. Children in our setting may also have siblings, as well as wider family members who are a part of the LGBTQIA+ community, and it's important to recognise and celebrate all members of a family, because what really is a family is the people who care for us, it's the people who love us. And while we strive to have an LGBTQIA+ inclusive setting in the early years, what our key focus should be on to enable this is to create a family. It should be a family inclusive setting, apologies. So let's take a moment to reflect on your own setting as it is, or perhaps a setting that you're familiar with if you're maybe not in a setting, and thinking about where can you see LGBTQIA+ or family inclusion. Where do you feel there is potential to do this? And then we can think about, you can have a think about if you want to add your answers to the text box or unmute, just to think about where you would maybe find inclusion within early years setting.
A couple of people just joined, Kelsey, and so they've just joined. I don't seem to have a chat function.
Right.
Yes, I do. Got it now. Yep. So just give people a couple of minutes. Welcome if you've just joined us in the last couple of minutes. Kelsey's just getting started and has been explaining particularly well the terminology.
Would you want me to go back to the start there, or?
Why don't you just carry on, and then people can catch up with us if they wish to at the end. How would that do?
That's fine. Yeah. So far I've just kind of went over the definitions, and this has been recorded, so it will be shared later on if you want to go back and watch it. But we're just saying about how when we're working in an earlier setting, when we're creating an LGBTQIA+ inclusive setting, we're also thinking about how we create a family inclusive setting. So just invited anyone listening to kind of reflect on their own setting as it is, or a setting they're familiar with, and think about where you maybe would see that LGBTQIA+ inclusion or family inclusion, or where you maybe think there might be potential to do this. And if you want, you can unmute or share your answers in the text box if you're able to. So you might think of areas where children participate in role play, what types of clothing are set out, or what are we modelling, how are we engaging the children in their play there. Small world play is another really good one. If you're thinking about if you've got your doll's house, is there plenty of Is it the very much, this is the mum, this is the dad, these are the children figurines, or is it the more kind of, the little wooden ones you get that are more, can be anything type of thing? So it's allowing children to have that opportunity to change up what they're using it for and decide, so that they can choose to show their family, or they might choose to show a different family that they are maybe more familiar with. But if you think of anything, please add as we go. But you may feel this kind of leads into this analogy of windows and mirrors. Was conceived by Emily Stiles in 1989. If you haven't seen it before, we talk about education as an opportunity to create both windows and mirrors. And this is not necessarily LGBTQIA plus specific, but it covers all areas of inclusion. The idea is that education should provide mirrors to learners so they're able to see themselves reflected back. And then in doing so, we then create windows for all learners to look outwards and see people who may be different to them, developing that understanding and acceptance of these differences. It is important to think about the intersectionalities of our learners. For example, if you have a child of mixed heritage with two dads, do we have examples of mixed heritage rainbow families, or is it only ever white couples? And it's these sort of things we want to think about to ensure we provide as authentic a representation as possible. And when we create windows for our learners, they then have that opportunity to look out. They can see the diversity of their peers, and it helps widen their perspective and helps to build that understanding and empathy. This means still having inclusive resources. I lost my place there, sorry. Regardless of whether you have those learners in your setting or not. Children and young people should be able to see their own identities, backgrounds and cultures reflected within their learning pathway, while also being able to learn about the experiences of others, the society that they live in. Currently in the UK, statistics suggest around 10% of the population are a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So if you have a setting with 30 families, statistically it would say there would be at least 3 LGBTQIA plus children or family members within your setting. So even if you're maybe sitting there thinking, well, we don't have any rainbow families or LGBTQIA plus children, it's still important to create those windows to ensure learners have a well-rounded view and understanding of the world in which they're growing up in. And then in doing so, we're then able to support LGBTQIA plus children and their families and our rainbow families. And we are very fortunate in the early years that we have a lot more face-to-face contact and opportunities to develop those relationships with families than our colleagues do, and the schools maybe do. And therefore we can work alongside families to understand them, help develop relationships within the setting as well. So I want to give a little bit of reassurance that it's okay not to know if you maybe haven't worked with an LGBTQIA plus child or a rainbow family before, but hopefully this presentation can give you some ideas, some links to resources that will help along that journey. And it's just as we would with any family, it's okay to ask what support they need, but also recognise that their needs may be different to other children or families, or even between two rainbows families, what their needs and requirements are, what support they need would still differ. By ensuring your setting has an inclusive ethos is also really important. So having those clear policies, that guidance in place that ensures all members of staff have that shared understanding and know how to intervene in any instances of discrimination or prejudice will help to show that key message that we want to send in our early years, and that is that our early year settings are inclusive. They're a safe space for all families, completely irrespective of their backgrounds. So visibility is something that is extremely important. So if your setting is visibly showing that you're an inclusive environment, not just LGBTQIA plus inclusive, but across all areas, families will feel more comfortable, know the setting is a safe space for both their family and their child. So having display posters such as these do not limit job opportunities, and displaying a range of family setups can be a way of supporting that understanding of differences and act as a conversation starter for the learners. And this is a positive way to begin to break down those stereotypes. Also, as staff, we can share our pronouns on our welcome boards or email sign-offs, and this is a very simple way to show families that you're aware of the LGBTQIA plus community and understand the importance of recognising and not making assumptions. And you do not have to have a trans person in your setting to do this. Having those pronouns there is just another way to increase visibility and sends a very subtle message of inclusion. So you can see there, that's our display board within the nursery, and then also my own email sign-off. And there's a hyperlink for why I share my pronouns, and you can use that, and it takes you to a website that gives you really informative around the importance of sharing pronouns. And that then leads on nicely to deconstructing the language. It is important that we're reflective of our practice and open to change, as often the language we use can be what perpetuates that heteronormativity and reinforcing those gender stereotypes that we'd looked at previously. So looking at the language we use in the early years, instead of saying boys and girls or ladies and gentlemen, we can say everyone. And that way we remove gendering. We're not grouping learners based only on one part of their identity. Instead of fireman or policeman, we can say firefighter, police officer. In early years, we all do the people who help us topic. But it is important that we make it clear that anyone can be a firefighter, a police officer, a nurse, ballerina, regardless of gender, that we're not putting these barriers in place for our learners. There has been research conducted, and that research suggested that the learners who are exposed to job roles where they see people like them are more likely to take up these jobs in the future. Instead of mums and dads, we can say families or grown-ups. We know that not all family structures are the same. They're all very different. Some children will have parents, single parents, grandparents, adoptive carers, and so on. So it's important to recognise these variances in the language we use and the impact that may have on our learners. I once had a learner, and we'd said just very off the hand, like, oh yeah, all the mums and dads are coming, and he got very upset because he had quite a tumultuous relationship with his mum and didn't have any contact. So it was then reflecting on my own practice and saying, oh, actually, I shouldn't have said mums and dads because actually there was other grown-ups coming as well. So it's about, recognising, reflecting and changing your practice. So we're including all those important people that are a part of a learner's life. And then if we think about celebrations like Mother's Day or Father's Day, it's also making those allowances for learners who don't have that. It's not taking away the importance of mothers and fathers for our other learners, but we're opening it up to include everyone. So perhaps if we're making a card for Mother's Day, or an important woman in your lives, this could be granny, auntie, sister, the next door neighbour that babysits you, and it's that way of opening up more opportunities for all learners rather than limiting them. And then finally, instead of he or she, we can use they. Now I want to clarify that we are not removing personal pronouns, but to consider what gender we give to objects. For example, if a child shows you a teddy bear and you say, oh, what's his name? You've already gendered that teddy without actually knowing. It's possibly supported by some sort of unconscious bias. Is the bear wearing a t-shirt, or was it a blue t-shirt, or was it a male child that gave it to you? And we then limit that child's play or imagination and may unintentionally be reinforcing those gender stereotypes. So it's just about, again, considering the language that we're using. Working in early years, we do have that opportunity to act as an early intervention of prejudice and stereotypes. because children are not born prejudiced. We know this. They learn from the messages they receive from those around them and from their environment. So here is, I will, in a slightly unrealistic conversation that could be used to challenge these behaviours. So we've got our practitioner on one side, our child on the other, and the child's gone, oh, that's a girl's toy, as I'm sure something we've all heard, either in our own childhoods or in our current practice. So the practitioner then responds, oh, well, what does that mean? What makes it a girl's toy? So not immediately getting defensive, not telling them they're wrong, using that curiosity approach. Because it's pink. Of course, pink's for girls. That is what we grow up with. And so the practitioner responds, so can boys not use anything pink? Look, Jimmy has pink on his T-shirt. Is that okay? So it's about challenging that thinking without telling them they're wrong, having them think, developing those critical thinking skills, which are so important, especially in the current context we're living in. Oh, yeah, I think so. And then having that, explaining it, reinforcing that all the toys in the nursery are for everyone. Do you want to play with this one? Yes, please. So it's around thinking about how we support that. So I'd invite you, if you feel like, if you'd like to comment in the text box if you've ever had this experience before. What are your thoughts? What happened when you heard this? What was the outcome? Was there any way you would have changed it? Or is there something you did differently? Or maybe you did handle it really well and you'd like to share that. So I'll just give you a moment if you want to type in the text box or unmute. So, Christine's saying, I think your examples of how to address groups or professionals is a very easy, quick one. Yeah, definitely. Having that, thinking about what you're saying and working within your team as well to know that it's that consistency. We talk about it all the time in early years. It's having that consistent approach. So knowing that no matter which practitioner overheard that, that's a girl's toy. That child would have had that kind of similar, almost not quite scripted, but yeah, almost like a script of, okay, this is how we're developing our thinking. This is how we're challenging these gender ideas to continue to move forward from there on. Anyone else? I can see the little dots going. And so Leopold's saying these type of conversations were a regular occurrence in the setting you used to work in, and appreciate the curiosity approach on how to foster their critical thinking skills a lot. Yeah, absolutely. It's handling that with curiosity. If you go in saying, oh no, you're wrong, that's really going to, think about the impact that has on that learner, and is that really going to change their mindset? It maybe just breaks down that relationship. So having that curiosity approach and allowing them to come to that answer really supports learners. Thank you very much. So I'd like to share this quote from Sarah Keyworth, and I think they really kind of knock them all in the hole here, because any work we do around inclusion, it's about including, not excluding, and it's providing those options and opportunities for all learners. So I'll read it out just in case there's any issues with seeing the screen. So there's this sort of irrational fear that the removal of gender stereotyping is the removal of fun and the desire to limit what children are allowed to experience, when in fact it is the complete opposite. Making things gender neutral is simply making every item of clothing, every toy, every colour an option for every child. So again, just reinforcing that It's for everyone. It's not about girls can only have pink and boys can only have blue. It's opening up and it's taking away that very binary thinking. So now I'd like to share some resources that can support you and your setting at whatever point in your inclusion journey that you are on. Here's just some examples of LGBTQIA plus inclusive picture books. There are infinitely more, but I've chose the ones that I've read personally and would recommend at an early level. And I would say I've used at least half, if not more, of these within my own teaching practice. And books really are the bread and jam of early years. So having books that reflect different family structures, gender diverse children, ideas that challenge stereotypes, and are in the end they're emphasising love and kindness and inclusion are what we really want to be reinforcing and supporting within our early years settings. We have LGBT Education Scotland have also created an early level book review list, which has just been updated just at the start of the new term, and it has some suggestions for it has inclusive books, also pieces of media that can be used to continue to support learning on LGBTQIA plus inclusive education, and it also has the suggested lesson outcomes and links to curriculum for excellence. So it's a really good resource, which I'll show you the link to now. So you can see that it's on my right hand side, hopefully it's on your right hand side, and the QR code will take you to the LGBT Education Scotland website, which was created by Time, which is Time for Inclusive Education. So they were the campaign behind bringing about the change in legislation to have LGBTQIA plus inclusive education embedded within our curriculum for excellence. And they have training available for all educators in Scotland. They're currently working on earlier specific training that should be arriving soon. So you can go on that link and sign up, and they'll email you when that learning goes live, and it's all online. I know it's stage 1 is online, stage 2 they come out and deliver in person. I'm not too sure how that's going to work with the earlier specific training, but hopefully we'll have more information on that in the coming months. There's also the Highland One World Seeds for Change document, which I use frequently when looking for ideas on intersectionality and inclusion. It's an interactive PDF that has links to a host of resources and focuses on global citizenship, which is a really hot topic across education at the moment, and it has a really clear structure. It makes links to learning very clear, has curriculum for the curriculum for excellence indicators included. So it really is a document that I would recommend. And through global citizenship, we can support our learners through those 4 capacities of the curriculum for excellence, and we're help to build those tolerance in our learners. Highland One World Centre do provide regular virtual training session on the Seeds for Change document, as well as other topics around rights for the child, and I would recommend attending when you have the capacity, because it is a really good approach to use. And we have David Dick, who is a nursery teacher in South Lanarkshire, and he's created a sway which has specific content relating to LGBTQIA plus inclusion in the Scottish early years, which shows a case study that he did for his masters, and it was around LGBTQIA plus inclusion in practice. There's also recommended resources such as specific books or display posters. So the one you saw earlier, that was one that David had created. And there's also links to some relevant podcasts and webinars that again can help to support on your LGBTQIA plus inclusion journey. Both Care and Spectra and Education Scotland have documentation to support gender equality and to challenge gender stereotypes and prejudices, and these are really useful resources that can support you through development and embedding gender equality and creating that gender equal balance within your setting. Education Scotland also has the Inclusion, Wellbeing and Equalities Framework with available resources to support whole team understanding of these key issues and their intersectionalities. And you can see, if you scan the QR codes, that will take you to those various sections. There are also lots of books that cover these topics. You can see some examples here. They feature some case studies and challenge questions. They have examples of how we can address these topics in the early years settings. So they're really beneficial to have a look at and use as you go through. So there's some that are specific to LGBTQIA plus diversity, some more focusing on gender, and there's other wider ones that look at intersectionality within the early years. It's just about having a look and seeing what ones are right for your setting and your families in the moment. So how does all this come together from a more of a legislative point of view when looking at our documentation? So across all the key documents in early years, there is a focus on ensuring we support every learner and their families to treat them with fairness and allow them opportunities to thrive and receive authentic experiences that are relevant to their own lives. So here we can see how good is our early learning and childcare, which stresses this for the best possible outcomes. So it says equity means treating people fairly, but not necessarily treating people the same. Equity in ELC means that personal or social circumstances such as gender, ethnic origin or family background are not obstacles to achieving potential, and that all our babies, toddlers and young children are well supported to secure the best possible outcomes. And you'll find similar comments across our key documents, as well as embedded into the SSSC and the GTCS practice standards that all practitioners must adhere to. And supporting all that we have discussed are the 7 learning themes being identified by LGBT Education Scotland, and these themes should be embedded across all areas of the curriculum for excellence from early years onwards, with the goal that children are leaving school having received a robust coverage of all areas, and this is progressed from the earliest experiences in nursery all the way through to secondary school. As you can see, we've touched on several of these topics in the short time, and there are probably some that you're already doing in your own practice. I know since the implementation of UNCRC into Scots law for the promise, there's been quite a significant increase in focus on children's rights. So it's ensuring that LGBTQIA plus rights are also acknowledged here too. So the idea of a right to an identity, the right to a name, the right to their family being acknowledged, all these come into play when we're looking at through an LGBTQIA plus inclusive lens. And when we challenge gender stereotypes, we also help to develop these themes. And we spoke a lot about representation. So it's ensuring that we feature LGBTQIA plus characters or role models, or even characters who challenge gender stereotypes and gender roles, and that can help with that learning and celebrating those diversities that you have within your setting. So again, reflecting back, going back to the mirrors and windows, ensuring all learners within our settings are able to see themselves in their learning. So I'd like to just share this final message that I received from a parent of one of the children I teach in nursery. I think this links back to the quote I shared earlier from Sarah Keyworth, that we're not trying to shoehorn children into boxes and label themselves with an identity. We want to give them that opportunity to explore and understand the world around them, as well as within themselves. Because at the end of the day, it's that idea of treating everyone correctly and kindly. And that's really what we want to be doing within our early years. That's where we want to strive to be. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please add them to chat box or feel free to unmute.